jack of all trades is a master of none. You can only focus on one aspect and do it well. And I focused heavily on the product. I think today in the US, there's about 70% of medical data, and these are very HIPAA compliant organizations. Data has been stolen.
Hi, I'm Bill Schick, FCMO and host of Lifeside Continuum. Today, I get a chance to speak with Peter Attia. He's the founder of Family Vitals. We cover developing an iOS app from scratch that helps families securely organize and understand their medical records.
AI is very limited in what it knows, especially in very complicated technologies. That's one of the hardest aspects of my app. Why would they even buy or subscribe that? To your point, we're not just spinning wheels. I'm not wasting my money and time before seeing the market.
It's great to have you on today. At what point did you know that you wanted to build an app and create a solution here?
Yeah, thank you, Bill, for having me on. So I think one of the things that happened is early on in my life, about 2 years ago or so, my family is growing. I have children, I have a dog, and suddenly I have my parents living with me. And then I started dealing with all the medical forms, the medical notes, all of the normal life things related to health. And then I realized, okay, there is nothing right now that can help me do that aside from storing it on Google Drive or all over my phone, notes, and photos. And this is when the idea really came to me. Fast forward 2 years ago, there was some layoffs happening in Verizon. And I thought to myself, okay, well, this could be somewhat unstable for me future-wise being in a company. I was not an any threat at the time, but I thought, okay, this could be a good reason to start my own company and see where that journey takes me. And I started my own app.
Mm-hmm. And you have a background in engineering?
Correct. I'm computer science, Florida USF, master's degree as well in business analytics. And that's kind of been everything that I've done since college graduation. I've been doing coding in all different technologies and capacities, and inclusive of leadership as well roles in Verizon.
So Peter, tell me about the product. What's it called and what does it do for people?
Yeah, great question. So I think the product is called Family Vitals. It's a mobile app in iOS for Apple users, for iPad, Mac, and iPhones. The idea behind the app is it's currently the only iOS app that allows the collaboration on family medical records. So, in a nutshell, allowing the users and the family members to upload photos, documents, x rays, lab reports, but also add their own custom notes and pull any data records from hospitals across US, UK, and Canada, and hopefully will grow to globally soon. And the app is currently available in the USA, and it's fully powered by AI from the aspect of based on your profile. It will tell you these are the important health recommendations that you got to tackle. You can chat with it, you can ask it questions. So it gives you that comprehensive medical assistant, if you will.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty impressive product, having a sort of a big family. And before starting this all up, did you have any experience dealing with the healthcare system or healthcare related data or programming?
No, actually, at all. Just I come from a family of doctors. My dad is a doctor. My brother is a doctor. A lot of my cousins are. So I've just had the background of medical family, medical records, and I've seen the problem.
You have all these records everywhere. And now you're responsible for managing them for a number of people.
Correct.
And there was nothing out there that did the job.
Correct. In a secure way. There could be something out there. What I wanted to also make sure is it's available and very secure.
Take me a little bit through the journey. So you experienced the problem. At some point, you thought, I could build something that would solve this problem. Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so I like building things. I like building products. It's what I've done even in Verizon. I normally build things so other people can use it, either being engineers or just end users from the company. So when I thought about it, I was like, okay, let's take it to the whiteboard. Whiteboarding it, then, okay, well, how do I even do this? How do I go about it? What can be included in it? And I started just drafting all the features, the things that really mattered to me personally at the time. And just jogging those out, I realized, oh, there is a big opportunity, especially when you have the collaboration aspect of it between family members. And that's what made it kind of unique, is that it's not just a person by person, which some systems do that, but no, this allows me to actually collaborate with my family, no different than Google Notes or Google Docs, where you can collaborate with other people. Then took that to design later on, where I actually started doing the full mock-ups myself and everything, and then I can visualize it, I can see it with my eyes, I can see the product, and then went from there to the actual development.
You talk a little bit about the whiteboard process. And you also mentioned that this took you about a year. Did you have a big team to build this thing out?
So I'm a sole founder, as it still stands today. About 2 years ago, I had the idea. I whiteboarded it. I kind of parked it on the side, and then just a year ago, I started actively working on it on the weekends while I was working full time. And only at the end of this, beginning of this year, where I quit my full time job, and then I started just doing this full time. Now, the idea came where I moved from whiteboarding to design to coding, and very intensively over the last 6 months to 1 year.
So you've done all the coding yourself. It seems like a heavy lift for such a powerful app. How did that happen? It seems unreal to me.
Yeah, so I think in the world of AI, it does help. One of the reasons why I also parked it early on is AI was not that intelligent to help me
Mhm.
build a big portion of it. Where over the last 6 months to a year, we've seen an exponential growth in AI and code assistance. And that's had helped me do a lot of the B work, right? The busy B work, especially in the code, especially in the product wording, and some of these aspects, the research. So that's kind of where AI helped me. So it carried, I want to say, 30 to 40% off, where I would have had to hire a couple of other people to do normally.
Right, a full team typically would
Yes.
take a couple of years to take something and spin it up. So you talked about initially, or sort of big picture, what the future market would look like. Someday worldwide. It is available, it sounds like, only on Apple iOS. Did you consider porting it or building it in Google or another marketplace or platform?
Yeah, I think one of the reasons is upfront cost for me to deploy it on Apple was cheaper. So that's
Mhm.
something for founders to always consider, is okay, what would it cost me upfront versus ongoing cost? That's kind of the reason why we went with Apple. The other reason is the security collaboration aspect of it. Will it be available on Android and even web? Yes, that's the goal future wise, and it will allow that cross collaboration between users.
Let's talk a little bit about the choice not to pursue other platforms initially. So there's cost, right?
Yes.
But it goes deeper than that.
One of the reasons why, so if you're working with Android or Google or web, you have to own and host users' data. So
Mhm.
patients' data, families' data. So let's talk about a family of 10 today, where I'm hosting that kind of stuff. My app today supports up to 10 users and pets. So if I'm doing the same thing, using my own databases, using my own infrastructure, that will cost me a lot, especially when you start looking at pictures and everything. So if you're doing that with Android and Google versus Apple, you're kind of relying on what the users already own and have today. That's the biggest aspect. And then, of course, the other aspect is HIPAA compliance. If I'm going to own patients' data, I have to
Mhm.
have serious security measures. Probably cannot be even alone as a sole founder. I don't think you want one person to own a million patients' data at any point here. So that's kind of the idea.
Okay. So with those other platforms, um, it would certainly take time and resources to build a system that is robust enough to serve, but also protect that data.
Yes.
Um, and then there's a burden of proving that those protections are in place and constantly then defending that data, which is huge.
Yes.
And I think you had mentioned that was part of what helped you narrow down the
The timeline.
focus of the app and choose the path to go live with in development. And that's how you landed on just iOS, right?
Correct. That's absolutely right.
One of the things I'd like to talk about a little bit is, and I think you saw some of this on your journey too. Initially, when we have an idea for a product, we sort of get we get this really big, grand vision of what it could be, and we can tend to throw in all of the components and features and functions of what it could be, and then our development takes 20 years and we never bring it to market, and we're investing a ton of money before we even get MVP or proof of concept out there.
Yes.
So I think that I don't know if you want to talk about this a little bit more, but the journey to narrow this down to a product that you could actually launch and start getting out to the market, as opposed to something that was just too big to ever even get started.
Yeah, I think there's two aspects of it. One is really creating a very clear feature set and research what will matter to the people. Why would they even buy or subscribe the app? That was
Mhm.
one. And then, of course, validating those super quick early on before developing it. So that way, to your point, we're not just spinning wheels. I'm not wasting my money and time before seeing the market, seeing the users. On the first aspect of it, on the product, I've had a very comprehensive list of the features. What do they do? How do they help the user from a user aspect? And then broke down those each one of those features down to the very minute granular level to understand how much time would it also take me to make it a reality. For example, I have a note section, note journaling section in my app. Well, notes can have bolding ability to the text. It can have an ability to undo, redo, that kind of stuff. Each one of these can add up. So that's kind of how I broke down all of it. Be very aggressive with the prioritization. I can tell you that even today, I have still a big list that I haven't touched. I was like, okay, well, that will take some time. It's okay. Get to the
Mhm.
market, get to the users, see what they want, rather than sit there and look at a big list that never ends, because it will never end. Otherwise, why am I doing this?
Right.
uh,
You'll always have a list of to-dos and things you want to
yes,
expand on. You need a framework to prioritize features and functions and development there. I think you said something that was really interesting, that was you had an idea of what the app would do. And I
yes.
think that a lot of founders start there. They have an existing tool, they have a problem they see, and then they take the next step to build a tool or create the solution. But you had mentioned something that was interesting, is you got some feedback on how people would use it or what they thought of the idea. And I don't always hear that in a founder story. They charge ahead with their idea, and it is what it is. Tell me a little bit about that part of the process and why that was important to you.
Yeah, that's a very good point. I think one of the things I didn't want to fall into is developing something that nobody else aside from me and my 5 friend group wants. So, what I've done early on is essentially anytime I meet somebody that has a family, that being in a conference, being at work, being anywhere, being extended family, I ask about this problem. I tell them, well, how do you store your medical notes today? And I start seeing this problem real life, and I tell them, well, what if this is available? Would you buy into it? Would you download such app? So that was the first layer of validation, and I want to say 90 to 95% of the time the people had the same problem.
Mhm.
Now moving on to the next layer of validation is before I quit my full-time job, I wanted to make sure that I'm not just diving in and landing short. So what I did is I launched a survey using any platform you can use, Paro, Survey Monkey. What I've done, use Survey Monkey, doesn't cost a lot. And
Mhm.
I specified the audience that I want, the people who I thought, okay, this is the marketing, the market or the audience I'm targeting, being the sandwich generation, people who have kids, they have parents, or they have pets, and they're caring for all of these. The family manager, in a way, and launching that survey asking simple 4 questions and if they are willing to pay for this app. showed me about 60% success. So that's kind of where that pushed me also personally and mentally of, okay, this is real. There is a real need here. People will actually want it. And I've decided to make it happen from there.
Very nice. It's quite the journey so far. So going through the process and building this out, you did it all yourself. You used AI to help you along. Was there any part of the process that was particularly surprising to you? Like you had a vision for how it would unfold, and then was there anything that you had planned on that happened differently and was kind of shocking to you?
Yeah, the technology is always different. Even with the AI, AI is very limited in what it knows, especially in
Mm-hmm.
very complicated technologies. Uh, so that's one of the hardest aspects of my app is how do I utilize iCloud in a
Mm-hmm.
real-time collaboration way for medical records. Uh, Doing that in a secure manner is not something very well documented. There is very few people in the world that have
Mm-hmm.
done that. So AI is pretty much clueless on what to tell you around this. AI can build you a pretty screen, but it doesn't tell you how to store records. It doesn't tell you a lot of the other nitty gritty details around architecture. That's
Right.
one aspect of it. And then I was very agile in, okay, here is the limitations of any technology that I started dealing with. um, I've had a lot of limitations, so I started toning down my features to work with these
Mm-hmm.
limitations. In a similar fashion, the AI agent that I have in the app, I had a grandiose vision, but then I hit the fact that, okay, if you want to pass Apple review, you have to tone it down. I mean, do this just as simple as text and chat to pass your first level, and then you can improve it later. So I had to be super agile with what can I do and what can I not do as I hit some of these roadblocks.
So managing your expectations based on um, some of what you would see in the requirements from Apple.
Yes.
So talk a little bit about that. I think when you and I spoke before, um, you had talked about how often an app going through the approval process in the Apple Store might take a couple of days.
Yes.
That was not the case for this product. Talk about that and why it was that case, and maybe how it impacted your timing and the work you were doing.
Yeah, I think if anybody looks it up today, the timeline for Apple approvals for a new app or rejection, be it either, it's normally around 2 days. Uh, for a new app, maybe a week. Mine, we were looking at about 3 months or 2 month turnaround. They're very responsive team. There is really nothing against them in that. They're very responsive, but there is a lot of rules and regulations around medical records, and they had to make
Mm-hmm.
sure that uh, everything that I'm doing is legit, that I am not trying to steal patients' data. So, for example, I use Apple Health to allow the users to pull hospital and clinic records because Apple
Mm-hmm.
already has that feature enabled in 3 countries. So, and we're talking about 40,000 hospitals and clinics. So for me to use that feature from Apple, they had to question everything that I'm doing. Okay, how
Mm-hmm.
are you storing the data? How are you transmitting it? Who else has access to that data? And they wanted to have a proof of every small detail. And I think that's one of the powers of why Apple is unique. I think in other scenarios, people will not even go to that length to prove an app is so secure.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and of course, the legal requirements from that aspect as well.
So that's one of the ways that I think you were able to accelerate the process of bringing this product to market. We're dealing with very, very sensitive data with a lot of oversight and governance.
Yes.
But you're using the already established and plugged in tools in the iOS ecosystem to basically shortcut. So the approval process took longer,
Yes.
but you didn't have to develop all of those pieces that you were able to leverage from the platform.
That's correct. That's correct. In a normal scenario, you would have to go and figure out different APIs that are connecting to Mount Sinai, to Quest Diagnostics, all of St. Joe's Hospital, all of these hospitals and clinics. Similar to my chart essentially. And I did not want to build another my chart. That was not my
Right.
goal.
As you are going about this process, thinking back through it, what are some of the things that you wish you knew before you started? So if you could time travel back a year or two earlier in the process, what would have been helpful to you when you were starting out to know?
I think definitely the process of Apple. If I had connected with someone that has something similar, I think that would have helped me even narrow that timeline down. So I think if I would do this again in my lifetime, I would actually reach out to people or app developers that have done this and ask them for
Mhm.
guidance on it. That's the one major thing that I would do. The second thing is design aspect of it. I would even do a deeper surveys to the market to get early on users be signed up for the product versus launching and then hustling for users. Those are the two main things that I would do differently.
Tell me about that a little bit. So expand on that last point a bit. So you would survey users earlier and try to get them signed up in advance of the launch.
Yes, one of the things that I think even today we're trying to work through is building that trust between the users and the app. That takes time, especially for this type of sensitive app and for a brand new app. So, for someone to download an app that has only 5 reviews to start off with, or even 100, it will take a lot of courage from someone to do it. Even if the app says we're absolutely secure, um, that will take a lot of courage. So I think if I had started 6 months, even before I know that Apple will approve or anything, just doing basic marketing, basic sign up flows from users to build up that brand, to build up that trust very early on, I think that would have actually turned differently in the first month of launch.
If I understand the flow, it was build, get user feedback, retool, get approval,
Yes.
launch, and market.
Right. I think the marketing started 2 weeks or 3 weeks before launch.
Okay, and that isn't terribly uncommon in anything in the device or healthcare space, is to wait until you're basically on the eve of it and then go. Can you expand a little bit on your thoughts of maybe how and why you would want to do it sooner? I think you talked about it a little bit, but let's dig into that a bit.
Yeah.
What is the value to you? Maybe at what point, looking back on your timeline, maybe during the survey process, when would you want to start building up those kind of connections and a potential user base?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, uh, I've launched the app in June 15th. So,
Mhm.
we're not even a month in. But if I would have started my marketing, and I wouldn't say marketing, I would call it just collecting leads really for
Mhm.
my initial launch, I would have started as early as January. Do a very cheap marketing campaign, $10, $20 a day, nothing fancy, uh,
Mhm.
and just let that run for 6 months and generate all of these leads, tweak it a little bit, but just get people attention, get them curious about the product. So when I launch, I already have a list of people that have been curious, have been engaged. I have their emails. I have true leads to kick off the product in a solid way. Where now I'm kind of starting to do that at
Mhm.
January 15th. So that's kind of the difference. Is I would have ran it in parallel versus launching the product and then pushing very hard to get people to download and use it.
Yeah, I like that point a lot, and it illustrates something that we bump into quite a bit, and that is with basically single founder entrepreneurs where there isn't a team. Um, Often the founder will assume all of the responsibility for everything along the way, and they look at the entire framework for developing a device, a product, a software, and bringing it to market. They'll look at all the pieces and think, I'm smart. I can do all of those things. I don't need to bring anybody else in. And that's true. Probably a lot of these things, are kind of simple in their execution, and I don't want to overly simplify the process. But it seems like when you lay it out on paper, I could do all of those things. But it isn't really about that. You only have so many hours in the day. I mean, I don't know how many apps you've launched in the Apple Store ever, but there's an amount of experience and negotiating and little fine details that can have significant impacts and implications. And so when you kind of lay out the process, those easy things start to stack up and extend your timeline from start to whatever success is. And I think your point is, if you had stacked some of those things, and I don't know if you're bringing in resources and help on the promotional market side. I should note for the audience that you are not a client of mine. That if you had sort of stacked it, like you said, stack those things up, you might be further ahead today.
Correct. I think you landed on a very good point. Jack of all trades is a master of none. You can only focus on one aspect and do it well. And I focused heavily on the product. And what I would have done differently is I would have actually partnered with a marketing/branding company earlier on. What I've done is I started those negotiations around April when I actually got the approval from Apple. And part of it is definitely my fear of just rejection, right? Do I want to invest so much money up front before even knowing that I'm going to pass? There's a portion of that decision that came from that. And today I am involved in the marketing, I'm involved in the branding, but I'm trying to outsource that to somebody that understands consumer base better than me, that understands empathy, that understands the theming, the branding, the wording of it. I'm a technical guy to a major degree. I am not a human touching, not like human wording aspect of it. I'm not a master in that.
I think you make a really good point there. And again, I sort of go back to previous experiences and conversations, and that some of those things that you talked about don't really get considered in the process. There's a thinking of, I'm solving one of the world's biggest problems ever, however big or small that problem is in reality. I feel like this is a fairly substantial problem you're solving. But regardless of how big or small the problem is, there's a sense of, I'm building this, I'm solving this problem, and everybody's going to buy it. It doesn't matter what colors I use. It doesn't matter what language I use. The benefit will be so great. Those things don't matter. If they're even considered. And I think as you go through the experience, the small details really make a difference. And knowing where your skill set really lies, but also where it's important for you to spend your time. What are the things that only you can do? Yes. In this role? You don't have to do everything, and bringing in a partner like you've done can really help you focus on those things.
That's correct.
Was there a point maybe in the journey and developing this where you thought, maybe this isn't for me, maybe this isn't going to work out?
Yes, a couple of times. I think one of them was in the midst of negotiations with Apple and being rejected by just, I want an answer. No, you can't use our health data, or no, you have to remove 1, 2, 3 features. And some of these things take weeks. And I'm running out of time and money, as always, right? And it was just a matter of, okay, well, what is my backup plan? What if this doesn't work? What am I going to do? What is really my plan B here? And those things have definitely come on mind. Thankfully, I had a plan B before I even go down that path. So that made me somewhat calmer and patient.
Yeah, it can be stressful when you're putting it all in and waiting on somebody else's thumbs up.
Yes.
Is there anything that you could recommend?
Of that decision that came from that. And today I am involved in the marketing, I'm involved in the branding, but I'm trying to outsource that to somebody that understands consumer base better than me, that understands empathy, that understands the theming, the branding, the wording of it. I'm a technical guy to a major degree. I am not a human touching, not like human wording aspect of it. I'm not a master in that. Go with medical data is security. Think about that as you do anything. If you're doing a medical device, if you're doing dealing with patient data, how are you going to manage it? How are you going to handle it? How are you going to really document the heck out of it? Because you are going to be asked about it a million questions by a million different authorities. As a small entrepreneur or as a small company, or as you grow, or even down the line, if you get acquired by another company, they're going to want to know your full architecture. They're going to want to know your security model, all of it, specifically related to patients' data or anything that's um, hyper regulated. That's kind of what I would say is really focus on that, and then start adding on it the features and the good to have and what will make it convenience. And of course, the last, like, very important lipstick that sells it is the branding, the colors, the theme, the ease of use.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I think as companies start to look at adding digital and software components, AI related components to things like devices and treatments and therapies, that they probably need to start considering the security, the data security component, as just as important as the therapy or the device itself, because that has a tremendous amount of exposure, and not having those protections in place can simply stall out the entire program.
Yes, and I think an important number is, I think today in the US there's about 70% of medical data in HIPAA compliant, and these are very, very HIPAA compliant organizations. Data has been stolen. And most of the time, patients are not aware that their data is being used or exposed. And people are becoming more and more aware of these things as they go through it, and as they're more educated in this new AI world. And they're very hesitant about participating in anything that deals with their data in any fashion.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I know I don't want my healthcare, my health data out there.
Right.
So that's key. If there is any other maybe takeaway or tips or recommendations that you had thought you might want to share with the audience that we didn't cover?
Yeah, I think depends on the audience. So if we're looking at an audience of founders slash early entrepreneurs, the main thing is what I believe, and I'm very early on in my career as an entrepreneur, is how do you validate that super early? It's something that I've heard from Netflix CEO when they started doing their his mentorship program. And he was saying you have to validate it very early on, very cheap, to make sure what you're doing is gonna be truly sold. So that's something I would hone in on. And then the other aspect of it is, don't quit your job until you know it will work, until you validate it, so you're not laying flat. Those are the two main things I would say to tackle.
That's everything I have for today. So thank you very much. You were great.
Thank you, Bill. I appreciate your time.
If you made it here, thank you. If you haven't already, like, share, and subscribe to the channel. If you want to learn more about this topic, I expand on it below, as well as in my LinkedIn newsletter. That's all for now. More soon.